Good morning, colleagues, and a very warm welcome this morning. It's always a huge privilege to open this year's National Trust Leaders CEO Conference, and to be standing here with so many experienced and committed leaders who are shaping the future of education, and through it, the futures of our children and young people, and ultimately society as a whole. In my view, never has there been a better time to be dedicating professional space to the development of society and the important role of young people and of modern-day leaders within this. I believe that everyone in this room would agree that we need a more socially cohesive and connected society, and that young people have a huge part to play in building and strengthening that social cohesion. Our role as leaders, therefore, is to encourage and enable them, modelling the future that we would wish to see through our own leadership. I open purposefully with this focus on our influence and impact on society, not with the intention to add weight to roles that I know are already demanding and full of responsibility, but with the exact opposite in mind. For me, I think this is a message of optimism and positivity, precisely because we do have influence and we can shape things for the better. When I look around this room, I don't just see CEOs of academy trusts, but leaders of people, leaders of communities, and leaders of systems. You are our present and our future. And knowing most of you as well as I do now, this fills me with hope, optimism, and excitement for what lies ahead. I know the values many of you hold dear, and I know that you will work relentlessly to see our young people, communities, and our workforce right. This is something to be really proud and positive about. And so this concept of shaping what the future ahead holds is really at the heart of today's conference. Reflecting on how the role of the CEO in education has evolved, what we've learned over the last decade plus, considering where we find ourselves today, and looking ahead to what the next decade will likely demand of us. What an exciting, invigorating endeavour to be undertaking together today. So let me begin with sharing a little of my own experience as a backdrop to where I believe the future lies as CEOs. Over the last 20 years, I've worked in leadership and workforce development roles across a range of sectors: adult social care and health, education, the civil service, and policing. Now, of course, each of those sectors has its own context, it has its own pressures, and it even has its own language. But what's always struck me is how much leaders across these different worlds have in common. So whether you're leading an NHS trust, a police force, a government department, or a multi-academy trust, the challenges and opportunities are remarkably similar. How do we help to improve life chances and quality of life for those we serve? How do we become and remain great employers? How do we harness the potential of technology without losing the human touch? How do we ensure inclusion and belonging are embedded into every corner of what we do? And how do we invest wisely even when resources are tight and the stakes are high? There are many more of these questions, of course. But these are not education questions. These are leadership questions. And this is important because it demonstrates that we are not alone in our quest to answer these questions. We are part of a much larger leadership ecosystem from which we can draw significant amounts of learning and into which we can contribute our own learning too. This is why I believe our forum strategy conferences matter so much, and I believe offer something really special. We recognise that education is not an island. It is part of a much wider system of public services and indeed of society itself. And there is huge value in taking opportunities like we are today to bring these perspectives together so we can learn and grow from our collective expertise. Rosalind Torres once said, "The best leaders are not confined by the boundaries of their own industry. They draw insight from the widest possible pool of knowledge, because innovation often comes from the intersections." Successful CEOs and leaders of the future will absolutely need to embrace this rich tapestry across services and sectors, but more on that a little bit later. Before we delve into this, though, I think it is also really important for us to recognise upfront the unique nature of education, and in particular, in relation to the development of the CEO role, as inevitably our past informs the future revolution and evolution of the role. When the role of the Academy Trust CEO first began to emerge more than a decade ago, it's fair to say that it was a long way from being defined. Many of you here have been part of that journey since. At that time, much of the focus was on building structures and foundations, establishing credibility, and proving that the trust model could work. This has taken a huge amount of effort, skill, and patience, and the legacy of this work has, in many cases, led to the formation and strong standing of some truly brilliant organisations. But today, over a decade on, the role has already evolved really significantly, and it is no longer just about running multiple schools. It is, at its best, about leading organisations that are employers of choice, that are the beating heart and enablers of their communities, that are innovators in pedagogy and technology, and that are critical partners in the wider system of public services. Aspects that were important at the very beginning of the role are still important, but they've been joined by these other elements that require a different type of leadership than 10 years ago. And looking ahead, the role will need to evolve again. Today is an opportunity for us to ask important questions and to make that time to reflect on our thoughts and ideas around them. What do we know today that helps to make us great leaders of tomorrow? What have we learned, or are we still learning, that we can pass on to the next generation of leaders? How might we need to adapt our leadership styles, and what support can we draw on in order to do that well? These questions, and no doubt others alongside them, are critical questions that every leader should be asking themselves. Why? Because fundamentally, as I said at the start, society is shaped and built by leadership. A big statement, I know, but we only have to look at our past and our present to know this to be true. Let's consider a few examples. Nelson Mandela, his leadership during and after apartheid didn't just change laws, it reshaped the moral fabric of South Africa. By choosing reconciliation over revenge, he helped prevent civil war and laid the foundation for a more inclusive democracy. Steve Jobs, like him or loathe him, his vision for and relentless focus on creating user-friendly technology didn't just create products, it reshaped how society communicates, how it works, and how it consumes media. Smartphones, as we all know only too well, are now part of our everyday lives. Malala Yousafzai, her advocacy for girls' education has influenced global policy and inspired movements for gender equality. Education for girls is now seen as a central pillar of development worldwide. Greta Thunberg, her leadership has mobilized millions of young people to demand climate action, shifting public discourse and pressuring governments. And finally, Dr. Jonas Salk, by refusing to patent the polio vaccine many decades ago, Salk ensured it was widely accessible, leading to the near eradication of the disease. There are so many amazing examples out there, as well as, I have to say, some truly awful ones, that just illustrate how absolutely critical leadership is to our world. And so it's our duty to continually consider how we evolve and adapt to the changing needs of those we serve. Leadership is too important to leave to chance or to hope that what worked yesterday will still work tomorrow. One of the most important aspects in our evolution as CEOs, I believe, will be embracing what I'm terming system stewardship. The ability to lead with an acute awareness that as trusts and schools we operate within interconnected systems, and that we must take responsibility for shaping and steering those systems in a way that creates long-term value for our organisation and for society. The emphasis here being on our active role in shaping and steering those systems and not seeing ourselves as passive participants within them. The successful CEOs of the next decade, I believe, will be those who see themselves not just as organisational leaders, but as system leaders, moving from organisation-centric leadership to system-conscious leadership. They recognise that the challenges that we face cannot and should not be solved by education alone. Whether it's growing levels of child poverty, decreasing levels of mental health, increasingly complex send and safeguarding issues, workforce shortages, or the digital revolution, these are all issues that require system leadership if we are to address them sustainably. They will understand that their influence extends beyond their trust and even beyond their own organisation and sector, into the very fabric of society, and they will be intentional in putting this influence to good effect. And finally, and vitally in my opinion, they will build and develop leaders of the future who understand and share in this commitment to system stewardship, ensuring that this critical aspect of leadership is not reliant only upon one or two individuals or institutions. This concept of system leadership isn't new, of course, we know this, but it's something at Forum Strategy we've been championing and working on for years, specifically the growing importance of CEOs as system leaders. Our series of 4 in-depth think pieces co-produced with Trust CEOs as part of our CEOs as System Leaders programme brings this to life through specific ideas, examples of practice, and practical recommendations that can really help to build system leadership in a tangible way. Our latest paper, The Power of Place, focused on locality leadership, has just been published this month, and you'll find copies on your tables, hopefully for reading and reflecting on afterwards. Within this work, we always include practical tools and ideas so that we're not just highlighting the what, we're not just being theoretical, we're also looking at the how. Our skills, behaviours and knowledge matrix that we've included in the Power of Place paper is just one example of that. But the big idea that I'm putting forward here is that system leadership should no longer be an optional part of the CEO role. The complexity of the challenges that we face, the changing needs of our children and young people, and the shifting expectations of our workforce mean that taking a system-level view is no longer a nice to have. It's a requirement for successful leadership now and in future. And as I mentioned at the start, this isn't about adding more and more to an ever-expanding role. It's about how we reconfigure the role so that it utilises the system view to enable and underpin all that we do and all that we may need to do in future. Reconfiguration, rather than expansion, is absolutely vital if we are to keep the role sustainable yet adaptable. There are, of course, other important aspects to the role's evolution which we will explore across the day ahead through the fantastic range of contributors that we've got lined up, each sharing their learning and experiences on what they see for the Trust CEO role in future. But of course, as with any of our events with you, the sharing of your thoughts, your ideas, and your experiences is a really, really critical part of the day. And it's how you connect with each other and it's how you draw on the power of such an experienced and diverse network. So let me offer a few questions to reflect on as we go through the day and beyond it, with particular emphasis on this idea of system leadership and system stewardship being an essential part of being a CEO now and in future. How do you currently see your role as a CEO? Do you see yourself as a leader of an organization, as a system leader, or do you see yourself as both? How do others around you see you? Where are you drawing your knowledge and inspiration from as a CEO? Is it predominantly from within education, or are you regularly looking outward to other sectors, other disciplines, other ways of thinking? If the next decade of leadership is about greater connection, greater collaboration, and greater system influence, what might you need to do differently to prepare yourself and your trust for that future? And how are you helping to develop the next generation of CEOs and system stewards? Because let's be clear here, insular leaders who only focus on what's immediately in front of them, focus too narrowly on the top-down targets and rubbing shoulders with the good and the great, will be the ones that are left behind in a world that demands more meaningful connection and bigger picture thinking. The leaders who thrive will be those who are curious, collegiate, outward and forward-looking, and willing to learn from the best and widest possible pool of knowledge and experience. They will be the ones who direct less and guide more, through asking the right questions of themselves and of those around them. The good news here, though, is that I feel that we as a collective in this room are already ahead of the curve. Forum strategy has always been about recognizing that different perspectives, when brought together, can be so powerful, that we're part of something bigger, and that we need to equip leaders to think beyond the immediate boundaries. The harder part here is how you take these opportunities and apply them into daily practice, and further still, how you also encourage others across the system towards this perspective too. So, as I finish my input this morning and hand over to our brilliant contributors ahead, here are some closing thoughts on what the next decade will require of us as CEOs. First, it will require us to be employers of choice. Our workforce is changing. Expectations around flexibility, well-being, inclusion, and purpose are higher than ever. The CEOs who succeed will be those who can attract, retain, and inspire talent in a highly competitive market. Those who are already doing this well have a really clear vision and strategy around this. They're well connected to their current and their future workforce, and they tap into up-to-date intelligence to keep informed of what some of those changing needs and expectations might be. Second, it will require us to be innovators. Technology, as one example, is reshaping every aspect of our lives, and education is no exception. But technology is not the answer in and of itself. The question is, how do we harness it to improve learning, to reduce workload, to increase equity, and to prepare young people for a world that we can barely imagine? Those who are already innovating well across a range of different areas, including technology, are seeing the developments of our modern world through a creative problem-solving lens, exploring how their organizations can respond and embrace. They tap into existing talent and skills across their organizations, and they are intentional in how they build and develop and learn in areas that are new or unfamiliar. Third, it will require us to be champions of inclusion and belonging at every corner. Our trusts and schools are microcosms of society. If we cannot create environments where every child and every staff member feels they belong and that they are seen and they are heard, then we lose a vital opportunity to effectively prepare young people for the highly diverse, highly interconnected world they are entering. Those who are already doing this well are those who understand that inclusion and belonging is not a one-size-fits-all and are relentless in developing their understanding of what it looks and feels like for different groups. They scrutinize all aspects of what they do to seek out those opportunities to further inclusion and belonging across their organizations. And finally, it will require us to be system leaders. Leaders who understand that education is not separate from health and social care, from housing, from policing, from businesses and the economy. Leaders who are willing to step into that complexity, to convene and collaborate across boundaries, and to use their influence for the good of the whole system, not just their own organizations. Those who are already doing this well are seeking out those opportunities to engage in discussions and opportunities to take a system-level view. They develop wide-ranging, diverse partnerships, and they network with intention, seeking to make use of important connections, but vitally creating connections for others too. So as we begin the conference ahead, I want to leave you with a very, very final thought. The question we're here to answer isn't about whether the role of the CEO in education will need to change. It absolutely will need to. The real question is, how will we as leaders and our future leaders in the pipeline ahead ensure that we change and adapt with it? Will we choose to be insular, or will we be outward looking? Will we see ourselves as organizational leaders or as system stewards? Will we cling to the familiar, or will we embrace the complexity and opportunity of the future? Will we leave our leadership evolution to chance, or will we be intentional in our efforts to look ahead and really adapt to what is required of us? I believe that in this room, we have a network of leaders who are ready to step up to that challenge, and indeed have been stepping up time and again over the years gone by. I hope our day ahead will leave you inspired, provoked, and equipped to keep striding forwards and to keep being those beacons of hope, resilience, and inspiration that our future generations so desperately need. Great leaders honor the lessons of the past. They act with clarity in the present, and they keep their vision fixed firmly on the future they wish to create. So let's begin. Thank you.